She cheated with a younger man, so I got revenge she never forget.
Hey everyone, I never thought I'd be the guy to spill his guts online, but I guess when your entire world crumbles, you need somewhere to go. I'm Martin, and I've been married to my wife, Carol, for almost 40 years. I just turned 60 last month. Our life wasn't perfect, whose is, but we made it work through thick and thin. We raised two beautiful kids, built a business together, and shared countless memories that I thought would carry us through our golden years. Carol has always been the light of my life. We met in college, and since then, it felt like she'd been my partner in everything. When I had health issues in my 50s, she took care of me. When we had to close our small family restaurant, we pulled through together, our bond unbreakable, or so I thought. But a few months ago, just as I was planning a big surprise for her 60th birthday, I discovered something that left me reeling. I wanted to make it a celebration to remember, something truly special to show her how much she meant to me. I'd arranged for a weekend getaway at the very same beach house where we'd spent our honeymoon. I even planned to renew our vows in front of a few close friends and family members. But during one of my planning sessions, something happened that changed everything. Carol had been acting a little distant lately. I chalked it up to stress or just the typical ups and downs that come with being together for so long. One day, I noticed she'd left her phone on the kitchen counter while she went upstairs. It buzzed with a notification. I glanced at it, and that's when I saw a text from someone named Andrew. I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but the preview of the message caught my eye. Can't wait to see you tonight. Remember to wear that red dress, winky face. A chill ran down my spine. Andrew? Who the hell was Andrew? We didn't know anyone by that name, at least, not anyone who'd be sending my wife messages like that. My hands shaking, I picked up her phone and scrolled through their conversation. It didn't take long for me to realize what I was looking at. Explicit messages. Photos of my wife I'd never seen before. Photos of a man, too, bare-chested, younger, someone I'd never met. They'd been exchanging these for months, maybe longer. The texts weren't just about lust, they were about love. Confessions of how they couldn't wait to be together permanently, how he made her feel young again. I felt my chest tighten as I read more. I can't keep living this double life, Andrew. Martin doesn't deserve this, but I feel alive with you. Soon, baby. We'll tell him soon, okay? We'll find a way to do it gently. My heart hammered against my ribs, and I had to sit down, afraid I'd pass out right there in the kitchen. Gently? They were planning to break this to me gently? As if there was any kind of gentle way to tell your husband of 4 decades that you'd been sneaking around with another man? I put the phone down, the screen still aglow with their lies. I felt sick, furious, and more broken than I'd ever felt in my life. But I didn't confront her right then. I didn't scream or throw things or demand answers. Instead, I waited. I needed to know more. I needed to see just how far this betrayal went. The next few weeks were a haze of pain, disbelief, and betrayal. I found myself doing things I'd never imagined, secretly following Carol's every move, piecing together every bit of information I could find. I felt like a stranger in my own life, playing the part of a private investigator instead of a husband. The more I dug, the deeper the knife twisted. It wasn't just recent. They'd been seeing each other for over a year. Andrew was in his early 40s, someone she'd met through her volunteer work at a local art gallery. Apparently, they'd hit it off almost immediately, bonding over their shared passion for modern art, a hobby Carol never showed much interest in during our entire marriage. She'd always said art galleries were boring. But now I realized that she'd been lying to me even about her interests, using them as an excuse to spend time with him. I dug through her emails, her messages, everything I could find. There were dinner reservations, hotel bookings, even flights she'd taken under the guise of girls' trips or workshops. All this time, I thought she was out enriching herself, meeting new people, living a fulfilled life. And she was, but not in the way I had imagined. She was living 2 lives, one with me, where she was the loving wife and mother, and another where she was someone else entirely. A woman who laughed easily, who shared private jokes, who told another man she loved him in ways I hadn't heard in years. The texts and emails were bad enough, but what really drove the final nail into my heart were the photos. There were selfies of them smiling together at fancy restaurants I'd never been to, lounging in exotic destinations we'd never visited, and, worst of all, intimate photos of them together in hotel rooms, her wearing lingerie I'd never seen before. It was a visual timeline of their affair, a chronicle of their happiness built on the ruins of my trust. But there was one email that stood out, a message she sent to Andrew just 2 days before I discovered everything. "I can't keep doing this, Andrew. I know we've talked about leaving him, but I'm scared. Scared of losing everything I've built. The house, the family, the business, my life with Martin. I don't know how to make this decision, but I know that every day I spend without you, I'm not really living." The decision. They were talking about leaving me. My wife, the woman who had stood by my side through every hardship, who I thought I would grow old with, was planning to leave me for another man. That night, I sat in our bedroom, staring at the ceiling, waiting for Carol to come home. When she finally walked through the door, I forced myself to smile, forced myself to kiss her on the cheek and ask how her day had been. She answered with her usual gentle tone, completely oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I didn't confront her right away. No, I needed to make sure everything was out in the open before I made my move. I spent the next week gathering more evidence. I wanted to see if she'd keep lying, if she'd continue pretending that everything was fine while she snuck around with Andrew. And, of course, she did. She went out with friends twice that week, and each time, I watched from a distance as she met up with Andrew. The first night, they had dinner at a fancy restaurant. I watched them through the window, feeling sick to my stomach as she laughed at something he said, her hand resting lightly on his arm. The second night, they went back to a hotel. I stayed outside for hours, parked across the street, staring at the glowing window where I knew they were together. Every second felt like a knife twisting deeper into my chest, but I needed to see it. I needed to burn the image of her betrayal into my mind so I'd never forget, so I'd never be tempted to forgive. Finally, when I had more than enough proof, I made my move. The night before her 60th birthday party, I asked Carol to sit down with me. I told her I needed to talk, really talk. She looked surprised, maybe even a little nervous, but she sat across from me in the living room, folding her hands neatly in her lap. "What's going on, Martin?" she asked softly. "I know about Andrew," I said flatly, watching her face closely. For a split second, her expression froze, just a flicker of shock before she quickly recovered, smoothing her features into a mask of confusion. "Andrew? Who's that?" she asked, feigning ignorance. "Don't lie to me, Carol," I snapped, pulling out my phone and opening the folder with all the screenshots I'd taken of their messages. "I've seen everything. The texts, the emails, the photos. I know you've been seeing him. I know you've been lying to me for over a year." The color drained from her face, and she opened her mouth, but no words came out. She looked down at the floor, her hands trembling. I don't know what to say, Martin. Don't bother trying to explain," I said, my voice shaking with anger and hurt. "I want to know one thing, were you planning to leave me for him?" Her eyes filled with tears as she nodded slowly. "Yes, but I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to hurt you." "Didn't want to hurt me?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You've been lying to me for over a year, sneaking around, cheating, and you didn't want to hurt me?" "I'm so sorry," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I never meant for it to get this far. I don't know what happened, Martin. I don't know who I am anymore." "You know who you are." I spat. "You're a liar. You're a cheater. You're a coward. And you're about to face the consequences." Before she could respond, I stood up, grabbing my jacket and the keys to my car. "Don't bother coming to your party tomorrow," I said coldly. "There won't be one." She looked up at me, stunned. What do you mean?" "I mean I'm done. With you, with this sham of a marriage. I'm filing for divorce, Carol. You can go be with Andrew, or whoever the hell else you want. But don't ever think for a second that I'll let you back into my life." I left her sitting there, sobbing on the couch, and drove off into the night, feeling both numb and furious at the same time. The next day, I cancelled the party, contacted a divorce lawyer, and started the process of tearing down the life we'd built together. But I wasn't done yet. I had one last move to make, one final act of retribution that would show her exactly what she'd lost. 2 weeks later, on what would have been the day of her birthday celebration, I called everyone who had been invited to the party and told them to meet me at our house. Family, friends, colleagues, they all showed up, curious and concerned. Carol wasn't there. I'd made sure she'd be out of the house, staying with her sister. When everyone was gathered, I stood before them and told them everything. I shared how I'd found out about Carol's affair, how long it had been going on, and how deeply she'd betrayed me. There were gasps, murmurs of shock and disbelief, but I wasn't done. I turned on the TV and played the slideshow I'd put together for her birthday. But instead of the loving photos and memories I'd planned, it was a compilation of every single piece of evidence I'd gathered, screenshots of her messages with Andrew, photos of them together, and the video that had shattered my heart. The room fell silent as everyone watched in horror. Some people looked away, unable to bear the sight. Others glanced at me with a mix of pity and disgust. But I didn't care. I needed everyone to know the truth. When the presentation ended, I took a deep breath and said, "This is the woman I spent 40 years of my life with. The woman I trusted. She threw it all away for a man who doesn't even know the meaning of loyalty." The room erupted into chaos. Carol's family tried to defend her, calling me cruel for humiliating her like this. My family, on the other hand, stood by me, their faces filled with rage on my behalf. I didn't listen to any of it. I turned off the TV, walked out of the house, and didn't look back. The fallout from my public exposure was brutal. Carol tried to reach out to me multiple times, but I refused to take her calls. She sent letters, apologizing, begging for forgiveness, but I burned each one without reading a single word. She ended up moving in with Andrew, but their relationship crumbled within months. The guilt, the shame, the condemnation from those who knew us, it was too much for them to handle. He left her, and she was left alone, broken and ostracized. Meanwhile, I threw myself into rebuilding my life. I sold the house, moved to a new city, and started fresh. I focused on my health, reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with, and even began to rebuild my relationship with my kids, who had been devastated by the split. They were old enough to understand what happened, but it took time for them to come to terms with the new reality. We all struggled through it, but at least we were moving forward, together. I kept my distance from Carol. The few times we had to interact, mostly about the logistics of selling the house and dividing our remaining assets, she looked like a shadow of the woman I once knew. Her vibrant smile was gone, replaced by a hollow expression of someone who'd lost everything. I could see the regret and pain in her eyes, but I never acknowledged it. She had made her choice, and I was determined to make mine. Months passed, and one day I received an unexpected message from Carol. It was a simple, short text. "I need to talk to you. Please." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop in a small town not far from where we used to live. When I arrived, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked thinner, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, and there were dark circles under her eyes. She seemed older, frilier than I remembered. "Martin," she whispered when I sat down across from her. There was a desperate edge to her voice, a pleading look in her eyes. "What do you want, Carol?" I asked bluntly. There was no point in pretending. Whatever sympathy I'd once felt for her had been buried long ago under layers of betrayal and anger. She swallowed hard, glancing down at her hands, which were trembling slightly. I just want to apologize. I know you don't owe me anything, and I know I can't undo what I did, but I need you to know how sorry I am." I stared at her, unmoved. "Is that it? You dragged me out here just to say sorry?" "No," she said quickly, shaking her head. "I wanted to tell you. I wanted to tell you that Andrew, he's been trying to contact you. He knows what I did to you, how I destroyed everything, and he wants to talk. He thinks we can fix this." I raised an eyebrow, utterly confused. "Fix it? What the hell is there to fix? You two got what you wanted, you ended our marriage, and now you're together. What else is there to talk about?" That's just it, she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. We're not together. We broke up months ago. He was using me, Martin. He manipulated me, made me believe I was unhappy, made me think that I needed him. But when everything fell apart, he just left. He ruined our marriage, then tossed me aside like I was nothing. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. And you want me to feel sorry for you? You think I'm going to sit here and pity you after everything you did? She shook her head frantically. No, that's not it. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but Andrew, he's planning something. He said he was going to ruin you, Martin. He wants to take everything from you. I don't know what he's planning, but Stop, I interrupted sharply, holding up a hand. You're telling me this now? After you've already let him destroy our life? I thought I could handle it on my own, she whispered, her voice breaking. But he's dangerous, Martin. You need to be careful. I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. If you're trying to scare me into helping you, it's not going to work. Whatever he's planning, I'll deal with it. But I don't want to hear from you again. Ever. Please, Martin, I'm begging you, she cried, reaching out to grab my arm, but I shook her off. You made your bed, Carol. Now you get to lie in it. Goodbye. And with that, I walked out of the coffee shop, leaving her behind. My mind was racing, but I refused to let her words get to me. Maybe Andrew was planning something, maybe he wasn't. Either way, I wasn't going to let Carol weasel her way back into my life out of fear. The next few weeks went by without incident. I threw myself into my work, focused on building a new life for myself, and tried not to think about what Carol had said. But then, one day, I received a letter in the mail. It was addressed to me in neat, almost elegant handwriting, with no return address. Curious, I opened it and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. The letter was short and to the point. Martin. I'm sure by now Carol's warned you about me. But there's something you need to understand. What I did for you. I didn't ruin your marriage out of malice. I did it to free you from the lies, from the suffocating life you were leading. You were never going to leave her, even though she was killing you slowly with her apathy and her false devotion. Now you can finally be the man you were meant to be. I'm not done yet, though. There's still one more thing you need to see. You think you've uncovered all the lies, but you haven't. Meet me at the place where it all began. Asterisk. I crumpled the letter in my hand, anger surging through me. This was insanity. Who the hell did Andrew think he was? He'd already torn my life apart, what more could he possibly want? But against my better judgment, I decided to go. The place where it all began, it could only be one place, the small cafe where Carol and I used to meet up back in college, long before we got married. It was the place where we had our first date, where we talked about our dreams and made promises for the future. When I arrived, the cafe was almost empty, just a few patrons scattered around. I spotted Andrew sitting in the far corner, a smug smile on his face as he saw me approach. Martin, he greeted me casually, as if we were old friends meeting up for coffee. Cut the crap, Andrew, I growled, sitting down across from him. What the hell do you want? He leaned back in his chair, studying me with an almost unsettling calm. I want to give you something. Closure, I guess you could say. I've already destroyed your marriage, but there's one last piece of the puzzle you haven't figured out. I don't need any more closure, I spat. You did enough damage. Andrew sighed, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a flash drive. This is everything you need to know. Everything about your marriage, your wife, and why she did what she did. I stared at the drive, tempted to knock it out of his hand and walk away. But some sick curiosity rooted me to the spot. What are you talking about? I demanded. He set the drive on the table and slid it across to me. Take it. Watch it when you're alone. Then you'll understand. Understand what? Understand that the truth isn't always black and white. There are things about your wife, about your life together, that you have no idea about. This will show you everything. He stood up, his expression unreadable. Once you see what's on there, you'll know why I did what I did. With that, He turned and walked away, leaving me staring at the tiny flash drive that seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. Back at my apartment, I sat down at my desk, my hands trembling as I plugged the drive into my laptop. The screen blinked to life, and a single video file appeared. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the mouse. Did I really want to do this? Did I really want to know what other horrors were hiding in my past? Taking a deep breath, I clicked on the file. The video began, and I watched in stunned silence as a younger version of Carol appeared on the screen, sitting in what looked like a therapist's office. She looked nervous, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "Carol," a voice off camera said gently. "Tell me about Martin. Tell me why you're staying in this marriage." The camera zoomed in on her face as tears welled up in her eyes. "I stay because I love him. But sometimes I feel like I'm suffocating. He's not the man I thought he was. He's so controlling, so obsessed with me. I can't breathe. But I'm afraid to leave him. I'm afraid I don't know what he'll do." My blood turned to ice as I listened to her speak. What the hell was this? When was this recorded? And why did she sound so scared of me? "Do you think he's capable of hurting you?" the voice asked softly. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yes. I think he'd do anything to keep me. Even if it meant destroying everything." The video ended abruptly, leaving me staring at the screen in shock. My mind raced, a whirlwind of confusion, anger, and disbelief swirling inside me. What was this? When was it recorded? Why had she said those things about me? The Carol in the video looked so different from the woman I knew, or thought I knew. How could she paint me as some kind of monster? I felt the urge to smash my laptop, to throw it against the wall and obliterate every trace of this twisted narrative that Andrew had brought to my doorstep. But I forced myself to stay calm. There had to be more. Maybe this was some sick, out-of-context manipulation he was using to mess with my head. With trembling fingers, I clicked on the second video file on the drive. This one seemed older, grainier. The image was shaky, and it took me a moment to realize it was another recording of Carol. She was sitting in a different room, looking even younger, maybe 10 or 15 years younger. The same voice spoke from behind the camera, gentle but insistent. "Carol, let's talk about why you feel trapped. Why don't you leave?" She glanced off-screen, her gaze distant. "Because it's not that simple. He's always watching, always controlling. I can't do anything without him knowing. And if I ever tried to leave, I know he'd do something drastic. He's threatened it before." My heart hammered in my chest. Threatened? What was she talking about? I'd never laid a hand on Carol, never once threatened her in any way. Sure, we had our arguments, like any married couple, but I'd never. I couldn't even finish the thought. "Carol, you need to think about what's best for you," the voice urged softly. "Is staying really worth the risk?" She looked up, and for a moment, I thought she was going to say something damning, something that would destroy whatever belief I had left in myself. But then she just shook her head, her expression miserable. "I can't leave. I can't do that to the kids. And I can't hurt him like that. If he ever found out what I've been doing." My blood froze. "What I've been doing? What do you mean, Carol?" the voice prodded gently. She swallowed hard, then closed her eyes as if bracing herself for something. "I've been talking to someone. Andrew. He's helping me. He's been giving me advice, supporting me. But it's not," she broke off, rubbing her temples. "It's not like that. He's just a friend." The camera zoomed in on her face as a tear slipped down her cheek. "I'm scared, okay? I'm scared of what Martin might do if he ever found out. But I can't stop. I need someone to talk to. Someone who understands what I'm going through." I stopped the video, my head spinning. What was she saying? That she'd been talking to Andrew before the affair even started? That he was manipulating her, planting seeds of doubt and fear in her mind, turning her against me even before our marriage began to fall apart? I took a deep breath and played the final video file. This one was the most recent, dated just a few weeks before I'd found out about the affair. It was shorter than the others, just a few minutes long. Carol was sitting on a bed in what looked like a hotel room. Her hair was disheveled, and her eyes were red and puffy from crying. "Martin, if you're watching this, then I guess Andrew did what he promised," she began, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. For everything. For how things turned out. I never meant to hurt you. I never wanted any of this." She paused, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I don't know how it all happened. One day, I was just your wife. And then Andrew started showing up, saying things, making me question everything. He made me feel like I was missing out. Like I was trapped. And I believed him. I believed every lie he told me. My heart ached as I watched her struggle to find the right words. I'm not saying I'm innocent. I'm not. I let him into my life, into our life. And I let him destroy us. But you need to know something, Martin. Andrew isn't who you think he is. He's dangerous. He knows things about you, about us, that he shouldn't know. He's been watching us for years. He's obsessed, and I'm scared of what he'll do next." Her voice dropped to a whisper, and she leaned closer to the camera. "If you're watching this, don't trust him. Don't let him get inside your head like he did with me. Please, Martin. I'm begging you. Be careful." The video ended, and I sat there, numb. Andrew had been manipulating her for years. He'd been there, lurking in the background, planting doubts, stoking fears, slowly unraveling our marriage thread by thread until it finally fell apart. He wasn't just a lover. He was a puppeteer, pulling the strings from the shadows, twisting everything until it snapped. But why? What did he want? I grabbed my keys and left the apartment, fury and fear swirling together in a toxic mix. There was only one person who could give me answers. I drove to the cafe where I'd met Andrew before, hoping he'd still be there. I stormed inside, scanning the room. And there he was, sitting at the same corner table, that same smug smile on his face as if he'd been expecting me. "Martin," he greeted me smoothly as I approached. "I wondered how long it would take you." "You sick bastard," I hissed, leaning over the table, my fists clenched. "What the hell is wrong with you? You've been messing with us for years. Why? What's your endgame?" He didn't flinch, didn't show any sign of fear. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, folding his hands together calmly. "Endgame? Martin, I'm surprised you haven't figured it out yet." I gritted my teeth. "What are you talking about?" Andrew's smile widened, but it wasn't a smile of amusement. It was the smile of someone who knew he'd won. "You see, Martin, I've known Carol since long before you ever met her. We dated back in college. She left me for you. Chose you over me. And I never forgot that." My heart pounded as his words sank in. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this was never about Carol," he said softly, his eyes locking onto mine. "This was always about you. I wanted to see if I could break you. To see if I could take everything from you, the woman, the life, the happiness. And guess what?" He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I did. You've lost everything, Martin. And all because you couldn't see what was right in front of you." Rage surged through me, and I grabbed the collar of his shirt, yanking him out of his seat. "You ruined my marriage because of some twisted revenge fantasy from 20 years ago?" "Yes," he whispered, his gaze steady and unafraid. "And I'd do it all over again." I wanted to hit him, wanted to beat that smug grin off his face, but I forced myself to stop. He wasn't worth it. He was a pathetic, vengeful man who'd spent decades nursing a grudge over something that had ended long ago. I let go of him, my hands shaking with the effort of holding myself back. "Stay away from me. Stay away from my family. Or I swear to God, I'll destroy you." He straightened his shirt, still smiling. "I don't think you understand, Martin. You already did destroy me. Years ago. And now, we're even." I turned and walked out, my chest heaving with a mixture of fury and disgust. I'd let a madman into our lives, let him twist everything until it all fell apart. That night, I sat in my empty apartment, staring at the wall. Everything felt surreal, like I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Andrew had orchestrated everything, the affair, the lies, the betrayal. And Carol, she'd been a victim, just like me. For the first time since the divorce, I felt something other than anger toward her. I felt pity. She'd been manipulated, used, and discarded. But that didn't change the fact that she'd gone along with it. That she'd let herself be drawn into his web of lies. I didn't contact Carol again after that. There was no point. We were both shattered, broken pieces of a life that could never be put back together. Andrew had taken too much from us, trust, love, hope. But he hadn't taken everything. He hadn't taken me. Slowly, I began to rebuild. I focused on myself, my health, my happiness. I took up new hobbies, traveled to places I'd always wanted to see, and eventually, I began to feel like a whole person again. And one day, I realized that the memory of Carol, of what we'd been through, didn't hurt as much. It was just that, a memory. A chapter. Of my life that was over, one I could finally close. I don't know where Carol is now, and I don't care. I don't know if Andrew found another victim or if he's still out there, nursing his sick obsession. But I do know one thing. He didn't win. Because in the end, I'm still standing. I'm still here. And I'm free. Free of him. Free of her. Free to start over. And for the first time in a long time, I'm finally at peace.